The darkest times in history all have one thing in common. The decisions of the majority are all made by one violent extremist. People like Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and many others. On a smaller scale, we see cult leaders, criminals, terrorists, and the advent of the modern mass shooter. But wait, did you know that I can do a backflip? This is something that I learned to do 23 years ago. Extremist is a buzzword. That means its popularity has been on the rise for a long time. People on both sides of the political spectrum use this word to paint each other negatively. Look, I can do a handstand as well. This video is not about the left or the right or anything in between. It's about the evil people who commit mass murder. People who we all agree are violent extremists. There are so many reasons that people become violent extremists, but the first one that I want to focus on is lack of identity. People experience a lack of identity for many different reasons. Trauma, social media, lack of purpose or direction, and a few others. But consistently at the top of the list is family dynamics. Now, this is something that I struggle relating to. I grew up in a loving home with a large family. I have a deep-rooted religion, spiritual community, great friend groups. I was a Boy Scout. I'm proud to be an American, conservative, an entrepreneur, you name it. I've always felt like I have a strong identity and more or less known what I want to do with my future. The fact that I've won the lottery on life is not lost on me, and I realize that there are so many people around the world that are born in worse circumstances. However, I've had plenty of times in my life where I momentarily felt like I didn't belong. I have to imagine that lacking identity would feel similar to this, but 24/7, and honestly, that sounds like hell. Absent parents, dysfunctional families, and no support or encouragement can lead to a weak sense of self-identity. In 2023, 1 in 4 US homes does not have a father present. That's not even mentioning all the homes where the father is present, but maybe he or his wife is dysfunctional. Fallout from a lack of identity comes in many shapes and forms. Notably, low self-esteem and confidence, difficulty building relationships, career and academic challenges, insecurity, mental health issues, and social fragmentation. Okay, so let's zoom out and look at why society as a whole is lacking identity. Broken homes are on the rise. Life is easier than it ever has been, resulting in people just feeling like they lack purpose. Social media has blown up, creating a comparison culture, isolation and loneliness. Yeah, we all went through COVID-19. Meaningless white-collar jobs, no sunshine, lower testosterone, you get the idea. The result? People who lack confidence, don't build relationships, they're vulnerable to external influences, they have career challenges, they're insecure, full of mental health issues, and have no sense of belonging or national unity. I mean, we all have that one friend who has no consistency in their life. They're constantly being influenced by every idea that comes their way, and they blame everything and everyone for their problems. They lack a base and a foundation. They lack identity. Imagine yourself at the end of a wasted day. We've all had one of those. You feel dead inside. I'm not talking about at the end of a deserved vacation. I'm talking about you're working from home. You have no supervision, work feels pointless, so you basically do nothing. Then work is over, you watch TV, eat junk food, and then waste the rest of your evening until you eventually pass out on your pillow. Willpower slowly got sucked up throughout the day with every decision of laziness, and you're left feeling empty in a meaningless life. I've had plenty of days like those, unfortunately. Let's look at Bobby for a second. Bobby just had that exact day, except he had that day almost every day. This has gone on for years. That worthless feeling is Bobby's norm. But then something happens. Bobby meets a new group of people. They welcome him in with open arms. They laugh and joke together. Bobby's worthless and lonely feeling is starting to disappear. For the first time in years, he's excited to start the day. The world has color. Food has taste. There's even a woman in his new group that's been flirting with him, something that's never happened before. But wait, someone just said something off color. Maybe it was a joke. Everyone seemed to agree though, but they're all good people who welcomed him in. They welcomed him into something that feels like a family, something Bobby has never really felt before. Time goes on and these fringe views pop up more and more. Bobby gets acclimated to a lot of these fringe views and even starts agreeing with a lot of them. He likes that there's a common enemy now. Bobby notices that when he promotes these fringe views, he gains popularity within the group. Bobby isn't even conscious about the change happening within himself. Years go by and Bobby is now a changed person. He's nothing like that pathetic, sad, lonely kid who was looking for acceptance. Bobby now has roots. He has a foundation. Bobby found community, and that community transformed him into an extremist. This person that I'm talking about is Bobby Beausoleil. Bobby was a normal kid born in 1947 who came from broken circumstances, had a wild youth, and eventually found his community at 21 years of age with Charles Manson. Bobby was taken in, made to feel important, influenced, manipulated, and brainwashed using LSD and pure enforced coercion into becoming one of the most devoted followers of the Manson family. In case you're not familiar with the Manson family, this was a cult created in the 1960s led by Charles Manson. Charles Manson is a freaky, violent extremist.
From your words, as Mr. Emmons quotes them in this book, it's clear that you were guilty of murder, and yet he says in all his conversations with you, he never heard you express remorse. Have you never felt it?
Remorse for what? You people have done everything in the world to me. Doesn't that give me equal right? I can do anything I want to you people at any time I want to, because that's what you've done to me. If you spit in my face and smack me in the mouth and throw me in solitary confinement for nothing, what do you think's gonna happen when I get out of here? Guilty. I wouldn't do anything that I felt guilty about.
You don't feel guilty at all?
There's no need to feel guilty. I haven't done anything I'm ashamed of.
Unrepentant, mass murderer, no remorse. Charles Manson created a cult community and manipulated his way into essentially becoming their supreme leader. He knew just exactly how powerful a community can be to those who feel like outcasts. Okay, so now that they have their community, it's time to purge, right? Maybe, but this is where the video takes an unexpected turn. A fourth turn. Ing. The fourth turning is a theory created by William Strauss and Neil Howe, both historians who created a book called, you guessed it, The Fourth Turning. In simple terms, it suggests that history operates in generational cycles of recurring patterns. 4 patterns to be exact, each one called a turning. The first being a high, where society bands together after a crisis. Growth and prosperity is enjoyed during this generation. The next turning is an awakening. During the awakening, there's societal unrest and challenges to the norm. Social and cultural change happen during the awakening. The third turning is the unraveling. It's during this time that institutions become weaker and conflicts arise between different groups and ideologies. The final step, or fourth turning, is the crisis. There's a large perceived threat to society with upheaval, destruction, and essentially resets the status quo. This 4-cycle repeating pattern is not meant to be a prophetic prediction of the future, but rather a theoretical framework through which we can view the world. Van Neistat made a really good video on this subject. I recommend you go watch it, linked in the description. Every 80 to 100 years, this framework repeats itself in one way or another. The scary thing about this, 80 years ago, we had World War II. 80 years before that, the Civil War. 80 years before that, the Revolutionary War. A threat to society doesn't necessarily have to be war. Think disease, natural disaster, cyber warfare, aliens coming down and invading us. Okay, maybe not aliens, but it does need to be big enough to force widespread change. A reset of society. Something so impactful and lasting that it puts off the next huge crisis for 4 more generations. In case you haven't been paying attention to world events lately, something scary is happening. The world order is being challenged by a new kid on the block. Increasing military spending, meaning taking the nuclear arsenal from 300 to 1,500 bombs. More soldiers, better jets, way more naval ships. All from a country that has a history of committing crimes against humanity. The world is starting to take notice, and as a result is also increasing their military spending. Look at Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, Thailand, Germany, basically all of Europe right now, Russia, which is doubling down on the war in Ukraine. Simply put, the world is locking and loading because of a massive perceived threat. Russia and China have banded together, and as a result, everyone is being forced to choose sides. Russia has moved the first chess piece by invading Ukraine. And make no mistake, this was a move made by a violent extremist dictator named Putin. And now we're all just kind of waiting to see what happens next. Everyone at the mercy of the choices to be made by a select few world leaders. Will Putin use nukes in the war in Europe? Will China invade Taiwan? Will unrest and divisive groups get bigger and bigger here in the West? The archetypes that Strauss and Howe talk about in their book are prophets, nomads, heroes, and artists. Prophets enter childhood during a high, nomads during an awakening, heroes enter childhood during an unraveling, and artists during a crisis. The hero generation are generally those with boots on the ground during a crisis, hence the name. Those in the hero generation, according to the book, would be the Republican generation born between 1742 and 1766, the Progressive generation between 1843 and 1849, the GI generation between 1901 and 1927, and Millennials, which as we know are born between 1982 and 2005. Minus Millennials, these are the people who fought in the great wars of our past. So take that, all you old people who made fun of us millennials for being weak. We're the ones that will save society, at least according to this book made by two historians. Okay, so what does all of this mean? Are we doomed to be in an endless cycle of destruction as a society? I don't know. But I do want to share one last story. A story about Easy Company. You might have watched the HBO miniseries called Band of Brothers, all about this military unit and their feats on the battlefield. Easy Company distinguished themselves from other military units because of their uniquely intense training, leadership, courage, and camaraderie. Their death rates were lower and they accomplished more than other similar military companies in the field. This was due to them having a unified identity and a strong community that pushed them to accomplish great things. The greatest generation was our last hero archetype, and it's up to us millennials whether or not we want to step up to the plate and become the heroes that we're destined to be. Violent extremists might be on the rise, but it's the crisis generation that resets the balance, creates rooted and shared identity, as well as a healthy and strong community. It helps society get a base and develop a foundation again. Now, I don't want to spread fear or false ideas. Ultimately, the fourth turning is just a concept. I've been going down a rabbit hole of interesting and kind of freaky stories lately. If you've heard the names Elliot Rodger or Alec Minassian, or maybe wondered what an incel is, I made a video about this exact topic. It's fascinating and sheds some light on some of these complex issues. Check it out right here. I promise you won't be disappointed.